Samsung's 2026 A series opens with the A17 and the A27, and on paper they look like the same phone. A 6.7-inch AMOLED, a 5000 mAh battery, a 25-watt charger, 6 years of updates either way. But one of them is more than twice as fast in graphics, and the other costs a fraction of the price. Let's find out where your money actually goes. The Galaxy A17, Samsung's entry into the 2026 lineup, and the Galaxy A27, a step up in price and, on paper, in silicon. Same screen size, same battery, very different chips. Both run One UI 8.5, with 6 major Android upgrades promised, but the A27 ships on Android 16 and the A17 on 15. Underneath, the A17 uses Samsung's 5nm Exynos 1330 with Mali graphics, while the A27 moves to Qualcomm's 4nm Snapdragon 6 Gen 3 and an Adreno 710. Both offer up to 8GB of RAM. Only the A17 still sells a 4GB version. A newer 4nm Snapdragon and a full Android generation ahead, the A27 is the more future-proof of the two. Storage is a match, 128 or 256GB on either phone, and both keep a microSD slot, though it shares the SIM tray. Samsung hasn't published the memory type for either one. A tie. Same capacities, same shared slot microSD expansion on both. On Geekbench 6, the Snapdragon in the A27 posts 2965 multi-core to the A17's 2042, a 45% lead. Single core is almost a dead heat, 996 against 977, under 2% apart. The A27's advantage is in throwing every core at a job, not in raw per-core speed. AnTuTu agrees. On version 10, the A27 scores 693,000 to the A17's 435, about 59% ahead. Version 11 only ran on the A27 at 884,000, so there's nothing to hold it against. Graphics is the blowout. In 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, the A27's Adreno turns in 908 against 364 for the A17, 2.5 times the frame rate. Neither phone was run through Solar Bay. Single core aside, the A27 wins everything. 45% more multi-core, 59% more AnTuTu, and 2.5 times the graphics performance. Same 6.7-inch Super AMOLED, same 1920 by 1080 class resolution, so size and sharpness are a wash. The A27 refreshes at 120Hz against 90 on the A17, and it's protected by Gorilla Glass Victus Plus rather than plain Victus. One measurement goes the other way. The A17's panel is rated at 800 nits in high brightness mode. Samsung hasn't published a figure for the A27, and neither panel supports HDR. Same panel size and sharpness, but the A27's 120Hz refresh and tougher Victus Plus glass take the display round. The A27 is the shorter phone at 162.4mm, 2mm less than the A17. Front on, they're within 1/3 of a millimeter. 78.2 on the A27, 77.9 on the A17. Neither is easier to hold than the other. The A17 comes in black, grey and blue. The A27 keeps black and blue and swaps the grey for light pink. Both use a plastic frame and Gorilla Glass, Victus on the A17, Victus Plus on the A27, and both score Class B in the freefall test and Class C for repairability. Ingress protection is where they part. The A27's IP64 rating keeps dust out entirely, where the A17's IP54 only limits it. The A17 is slimmer and lighter, the A27 shorter and better sealed at IP64. Different trade-offs from the same 5000 mAh starting point. The rear cameras are the same on paper, a 50-megapixel f1.8 main with optical stabilization, a 5-megapixel ultra-wide, a 2-megapixel macro, and no telephoto on either. The differences are in front and in video. The A17 has a 13-megapixel f2 selfie camera. The The A27 drops to 12 megapixels at f2.2 but adds autofocus. And the A27 records 4K at 30 frames per second, where the A17 stops at 1080. The rear hardware is identical, so the A27 wins on autofocus selfies and 4K video, the only two places these cameras actually differ. Both phones carry the same 5000 mAh cell, rated for the same 1200 charge cycles, and both charge at 25 watts. What differs is what they do with it. The A27 lasts 51 hours and 10 minutes in the endurance test, against 43.52 on the A17, over 7 hours more, and earns a Class A energy rating to the A17's Class B. Plugged in, the A27 takes on about 1400 mAh in the first 15 minutes, 28% of its battery. The A17 manages 1200, or 24%. By the half-hour mark they've nearly converged, 2500 against 2400, 50% versus 48. The tail tells a different story. Empty to full takes the A17 80 minutes. The A27 needs 88. Normalized per 1000 mAh, that's 16 minutes against 17.6. So despite the slower start, the A17 finishes first. Same cell, same charger. The A27 buys you over 7 extra hours of endurance. The A17 gets back to full 8 minutes sooner. Pick the one that matches how you use a phone. Both stop at Wi-Fi 5 and USB Type-C 2.0, though the A27 adds OTG. Bluetooth goes the other way, 5.3 on the A17, 5.1 on the A27, and both track the same 5 satellite systems. The A17 lists NFC as region-dependent. Samsung hasn't specified it for the A27. Neither has an infrared blaster. Mostly matched. The A17 actually carries the newer Bluetooth stack. The A27 answers with USB OTG. The two are identical here. A side-mounted fingerprint reader on both, plus an accelerometer, gyroscope, and compass. Neither lists a hardware proximity sensor. A straight tie, same side-mounted reader, same sensor suite. So what does each of them actually cost? Here's how the A17 and the A27 line up across their storage options, in US dollars, Indian rupees, euros, and Indonesian rupiah. The gap is the whole story of this comparison. The A17 is one of the cheapest ways into a 5G Samsung, while the A27 asks for a serious step up. You're paying a large premium for the faster chip, the 120Hz screen, and 4K video. These are the base prices and are subject to change. You might get better deals, discounts and coupon codes, or installment plans when you actually decide to buy. The A17 is the value pick by a wide margin. The A27 is the better phone, but you pay for every bit of it. The A27 is the real upgrade. 120Hz screen, 45% more multi-core, 2.5 times the graphics, 4K video, and over 7 hours more endurance. The A17 answers with a slimmer, lighter body, a measured 800 nit panel, a full charge 8 minutes sooner, and a price the A27 can't touch. So which one would you pick, the A17 or the A27? Let us know in the comments, and if this comparison helped, drop a like and subscribe for more.